Okay. Good evening. We are a little bit more than 80 days since this war had started. Israel has around 500 soldiers that were killed since the war started. About 170 of them were killed during the war in Gaza, meaning after October 7th. We have around 800 civilians who were killed on October 7th, 58 officers, and 10 ISA, 10 from ISA. More than 11,000 rockets were launched by Hamas to Israel, various areas in Israel. In the south, we have about 150,000 evacuees of the communities that were attacked on October 7th. We still have 129 hostages in the hands of Hamas. 86 were released, but 129 Israelis are still there, including children and elderly and sick. With regard to the war itself in Gaza, we understand that the IDF has a success in dismantling the terror infrastructure of Hamas. Step by step, IDF published that 1,500 tunnel shafts and underground passages uncovered since the beginning of this war. This means that almost everywhere you see shafts, the terrorists are coming out of these shafts or sometimes planting explosives and mines in the entrances to these shafts, and that's how they cause to these casualties among the IDF. We see a decline in the amount of launching of rockets by Hamas in the past 2 weeks, which gives us a little bit of feeling that on the one hand, this war is long, it is going slowly. There is a lot of terrorist infrastructure in Gaza. Almost in every home, IDF finds munitions. But on the other hand, it is a success with regard to actually dismantling these terror infrastructures house by house, meter by meter, and all of us here in Israel understand that it takes time to bring security and to destroy all these infrastructures that are spread everywhere. I can even say that the feeling is that in the past week, we've seen less alarms in the south and a little bit more alarms in the north. And here I want to focus for a moment on the data about what's happening here up north. Since this war started and IDF is retaliating to Hezbollah attacks against Israel, we have seen more than 500 attacks of the IDF against Hezbollah, terror infrastructures, anti-tank squads, launchers, military operatives. About 130 Hezbollah military operatives were killed since the war started. And I can tell you that we've seen a funeral of one of them. And what you could see in the funeral, we published it on our Twitter, is you could see that the Boy Scouts of Hezbollah participated in the funeral, and they were carrying posters. The first poster was of the military operative who was killed. The second poster was of Khomeini, and the third poster was of Khamenei, both of them supreme leaders of Iran. And then you saw some armed and uniformed Hezbollah military operatives participating in the funeral and marching and singing "Death to Israel, Death to America." So this is just a small example to the ideology and the motivation that is behind this campaign also up north. We have 80,000 Israelis that were evacuated from their homes. I will discuss this in details in a minute. I know that on the Lebanese side as well, there are probably a few tens of thousands that were evacuated. We don't know exactly how many. Hezbollah already promised compensation to those that their houses were destroyed by the IDF attacks. Every day, if I'm trying to summarize this, every day we have around 10 a claiming of responsibility to attacks against Israel by Hezbollah. A little bit less, a little bit more. That's the average. Anti-tank missiles are accurate missiles. I'll deal with that in a minute. So since this war started, we had 1,000 launchings from Lebanon of everything. UAVs, mortars, rockets, anti-tanks, which are not necessarily launched against tanks, usually not against tanks, and anti-aircraft missiles. About a third of them fell in Lebanon. That's a lot of munition. I want to talk a little bit about the types of munition that was used by Hezbollah. And before doing so, I want to invite all of you to write questions in the Q&A, and I will try to address as many questions as possible after the briefing. So I want to give some examples to what is being used. Burkan, it's a barrel bomb. What's a barrel bomb? In the past, a barrel bomb was a very heavy bomb that was just dropped from a helicopter or a plane. Very heavy bomb, meaning that its weight is about between 100 tons to 500 tons. Its range is about 10 kilometers. Today, these bombs are on missiles. Hezbollah developed that during the civil war in Syria to put them on missiles, and it can create a lot of damage. And they have an accuracy of about 150 meters. They are very cheap, only a few hundreds of dollars to each missiles. And Hezbollah probably has a few thousands of these. These were already used and launched against Israel up here in the north. I heard them myself when they were launched in the Western Galilee against an army base. A lot of damage and challenging to intercept. Another type of missile is Grad. These are much smaller with regard to the amount of explosive, around 40 kilograms. It's very popular and it's very effective. And Hezbollah has a few tens of thousands of these. These can get to a range of about 45 kilometers, meaning a little bit around Haifa. Okay, that's basically around Haifa, even a little bit to the south of Haifa. UAVs, the first time ever that Hezbollah uses UAVs, 2,000 UAVs, Mossad one, which are actually based on the Ababil, the Iranian Ababil, in a range of about 120 kilometers. And they can carry about 40 kilograms of explosives. Mortars, these are small shells that Hezbollah has to various small ranges. The maximum range is about 20 kilometers. There are most of them are to 10 kilometers, and maybe a little bit less. Until today, most of these mortars that were launched to these ranges, to the small ranges, but they can get up to 20 kilometers. As for the anti-tanks, we have various kinds from RPG to Sager, Fagot, Cornet, from a short range of less than a kilometer to a range of up to 8 kilometers. Very, very accurate in centimeters, and impossible to intercept with Iron Dome or all of these, because it's just a different kind of shooting. It's a direct shooting. It doesn't go like this. I hope you can see me, everybody. It goes like this. And this is the biggest problem now as we speak during this war, because Hezbollah is launching these every day against our communities and against our soldiers. I'll give you just a small story from today that I heard in the radio on my way here. In one of these towns that I used to take the groups, those of you who came with me to the border, maybe visited with me, a small community named Dovev. It is not at the border, but maybe a kilometer away from the border. And this, of course, is a community that is evacuated. And one of the farmers in Dovev that raise chickens, and not only chickens for eggs, but also raise apples and peaches and different kind of stuff. He was working in his chicken coop, and the soldiers that he hosts in his home to take a shower called him and said, "There is no hot water. Can you come and help us?" So he left the chicken coop, which is next to the border, and went to his home, a few hundreds of meters away from there, to help the soldiers. And when he was at home, his chicken coop was destroyed by an anti-tank missile. His life was saved accidentally. So this is a small example from today. The chicken coops of Dovev were targeted a few times since this war started. Blast is also meaningful when we speak about these small missiles, because if I take Manara, for example, which is a small kibbutz next to the border in the Upper Galley, and we'll talk about it more in a minute, if a missile hits an apartment, the apartment is destroyed, but also the apartment above it and the apartment below it has damages, so you need to fix much more than one family's home. What we see with Hezbollah in the past few days is that Hezbollah is actually launching more from populated areas, using the Lebanese as human shields, with in opposed to the beginning of the war that there were more launching of anti-tanks from open areas between the trees and stuff like that. I can show you an example of a photo that we created of a launching, I hope you can see, I'll do it again, of a launching from a mosque. I guess you can see it now. This is a mosque in a town named Yarun, that's in the Western Galley, but by the way, very close to Dovev, which is the community I've mentioned. And from Yarun, you can see the blast here of the shooting from the mosque towards Israel, from South Lebanon. This is direct fire, and this is coming from inside the community. When you stand in Dovev, you can see this mosque. Those of you who came with me could see this mosque very, very clearly, even without a binocular. We also had the incident, around 6 of them, of anti-aircraft missiles that were launched against our UAVs over here up north. These are small missiles, but very advanced, that can be launched to targets that are not very fast, such as our UAVs and helicopters. One last thing I want to mention is a shooting that happened yesterday in the western area, actually straight line from where I am now, towards a church which is based on top of a hill, and the launching was made around 3.5 kilometers from there, on top of another hill, inside Lebanon, and the church was damaged, and we had the person who was in the church who was wounded. Soldiers came to help and to rescue, and then another anti-tank missile was launched to this place, to the church, and 9 soldiers were wounded. I said that this webinar, is all about a personal note of the connection between the south and the north of Israel. And the reason I've published it this way is because last week I visited both borders. I visited the southern border and we visited the northern border, and I live here not far from the northern border. And I wanted to share with you my experience. I know it is difficult to get the impression when you are far away on the other side of the ocean, but I thought that it would be important to do that, because the impression is extremely deep. So what I'm going to share with you today is mainly photos that I took, or people who were with me that took the photos. And I want to start from the south. We were in Kfar Aza. I'll show you the photos. Okay. In Kfar Aza, the feeling is that the time is standing still. What you see here is a sukkah, because October 7th happened in the last day of Sukkot, in Simchat Torah, and next to this house where people were butchered, you see the sukkah still standing. In one of the places, I saw a pot with the food that was left on the lawn, and nobody's taking it. Everything just froze. And You can see this is next to a house. Somebody probably sat on this balcony before it was burned. And this is in the street of what it called the young neighborhood, the neighborhood of the young people. And on each home, there is a sign like this, that in this home, somebody was murdered, or from this home, somebody was kidnapped. If you see a circle and a red dot inside, it means that there were casualties in this home. If you see this word in Hebrew, it means that Zaka came and cleaned the area from the bodies. You can see the bottles of beer here because people celebrated the day before. As I've said, it's the neighborhood of the young, and it was a holiday. And we've seen these sites of empty bottles of beers in some of the places, a little small evidence of the life that used to be there. Give you some more. Not all the homes were burned. There are many homes that it looks like they are still complete and everything is okay, but then you see this circle and dot. This caught my attention. What is written here in Hebrew is the remains of a person on the couch. And you can see the bullets in the refrigerator. And here you can see that people were supported peace. It's written peace here in Hebrew. I came back home that day and I told my husband that what I've seen is a genocide. There is no other word to describe what happened down south. But actually, not only the sites of the genocide shocked me. From Kfar Aza, we went to Sderot. And Sderot is an empty town. And it was really difficult, the thought, and that we have kind of both edges of the country are empty from residents, the north and the south. The whole Zionist dream and Zionist vision is based on settlement, not in the political meaning of this word, but settlement meaning that if we don't develop the land, if we don't cultivate the land, we are not entitled to it. One of the Zionist heroes that was killed in a clash between Arabs and Jews in Tel Hai in 1917, Yosef Trumpeldor, said that the borderline is the furrow in the field of the plow. Tel Hai, after this clash in 1917, was evacuated, and it never became a settlement. Today, it's a small college, which is again empty. It's in the Upper Galilee, and it was evacuated. The whole area was evacuated for the first time after Tel Hai became a symbol exactly for that we should not evacuate communities. The whole Upper Galilee is evacuated. We didn't evacuate people in the Galilee and in the south since 1948. And I want to show you how it looks like in the map. You know, I'm an intelligence officer, I like maps. So I want to show you how it looks like in the map of the state of Israel for a moment. And I hope you can see my click here. This is the area around Gaza, and all the communities in this area are evacuated. That's the Upper Galilee. All the communities in distance of around 3-4 kilometers are evacuated. And the emptiness and the void is something that was really, really difficult to explain and to reflect to you, and really, really difficult to understand. In Sderot, I've seen neighborhoods of new houses that were just built, that people just came in probably a few months ago, completely new, and they are all empty. We couldn't find any place to eat lunch because everything is empty, everything was closed, even the bakery, the shopping malls, the restaurants. And even though that today in the South, there are less alarms, and the threat of invasion actually doesn't exist now because IDF is inside Gaza, it is impossible to bring the people back because the voices of the war are very strong and very loud and very present because of the fightings inside Gaza. There is a psychological barrier to go back there by the people who live there. because of the trauma. And Kfar Aza is a very good example to what I'm describing. Before the massacre, it had a waiting list of 3 years to people who wanted to come and live there. And now we don't know exactly what is going to happen. If I'm going back to the north, and I want to show you how the emptiness looks like in the north, I'll try to open a few photos that I took, and my friend. This is one of them. You can see me in the photo, of course. It's a nice house, and you have a tank in the parking instead of a private car. Another photo. My husband took this photo from my home just to understand how it is to live here now. He took it last week when he was just walking with the dogs in one of the parks in my small town, and you can see the blast that actually happened in Lebanon by IDF attack. Of course, the blast was heard clearly from my town. And if I'm taking another photo of what it means close, it means also barriers on the main roads, not to enable the civilians to cross, because if they will cross, they're actually being hunted by Hezbollah with these anti-tank missiles. As I've said, anti-tank missiles that are not necessarily launched against tanks. In most cases, they are not launched against tanks. So this is how a closed road look like. Last week, we actually met 2 mayors in our tour in the north, one from Kiryat Shmona, which is a small town of 22,000 people, and the other one of a regional municipality, which has around 30 small communities, kibbutzim. And they explained to us, what does that mean? To be responsible for evacuees, to be responsible to communities, that you need to give the services to people who are actually spread all over the country. So in the municipality of the Upper Galilee, we had 14 kibbutzim, 14 communities that are evacuated, 6 by the decision of the government, and 8 independently decided that it's impossible to live this way, and half of the people are not there. Some of them are in a distance which is more than 5 kilometers from the border. And at the same time, they have 7 communities which live regular lives, but actually are hosting the evacuees from the other. In Kiryat Shmona, as I've said, a town of about 22,000 people, there are 3,000 people that are still in the town. All the others are spread in 200 hotels all over the country. In this small town, about 150 missiles already fell in the town. This town is targeted every day. 13 UAVs fell in the town. 6 buildings were directly hit, including, as I saw, a damage in a kindergarten. Only today, just 2 hours ago, they were launching to Kiryat Shmona. 11 launching, 4 falls in the town, 3 were intercepted. This is just an example from this afternoon. The damage in these communities, especially in those who are very, very close to the fence, is not only because of the missiles of Hezbollah and the attacks of Hezbollah. To say it honestly, some of the damage comes also from the presence of the IDF there, because if you can imagine the tank that I've just shown you driving in the narrow street of the kibbutz, well, it doesn't end up very well. Kibbutz Manara, it's a small kibbutz, very close to the border. It was all over the news in Israel in the past week. There are 86 homes or apartments that were hit in this kibbutz out of 155 homes, 86 apartments that were damaged, from small damage to bigger damage, few of them completely destroyed. A lot of damage in this very small kibbutz that is targeted every day by Hezbollah. In some of these places, you need to run if you want to move from one place to another, because Hezbollah will target you. People feel that they are being hunted. There are places like in Metula and Manara that you cannot even go to check the damage because it's too dangerous. The night of my visit, I also visited a friend in one of these communities in the Upper Galilee, 6 kilometers from Kiryat Shmona. Again, I heard the alarms, I heard the explosions, I heard the interceptions, and I heard the hits in the town of Kiryat Shmona. And when I drove back, I was in a town which is north to Kiryat Shmona. To drive back home, I had to go through the side roads and not to drive through the city. Kiryat Shmona, for example, if I'm trying to give you the impression of what it's like to give services to people who are outside of the town, opened in various places around Israel, 50 kindergartens, 24 preschools, 3 schools, all of them everywhere in Israel. And the people who are dealing with it, the municipality workers, need to travel everywhere to make sure that all the children are getting what they need. Thousands of children were integrated in the local educational systems in the area where they evacuate to. In the regional municipality, they had to find alternative space to schools that are regional school, but actually in communities that were evacuated. Sasa is one of them. It's a very good example. Even people from my town sometimes are going to study in Sasa. The school was closed, and last week the auditorium was hit with an anti-tank missile. Most of the evacuees are living in hotels. Some are living with families, but most of them are living in hotels. Sounds like a nice vacation. It's not a nice vacation because 2 months of a family in one room, like 2 parents and 3 children in one room, no kitchen, no laundry. How do you make the laundry? They had to buy laundry machines. Small questions of the everyday life and how this is working. It's not a vacation anymore. Many people hired apartments. And this is for me, to see this process of more and more people hiring apartments. And I see the same process in the South, that we see more and more communities renting compounds that all the families can live together in various places in Israel, Tel Aviv to Kiryat Gat to other different kibbutz in the north, in the center, whatever. This feels that's the only option now, and I totally again understand how difficult it is to live in a hotel. But on the other hand, it means that to go back to the war zones, it will be much more difficult, especially, by the way, for those who are not coming from the kibbutz, those who are the weak societies, those who are the workers and not the employees. The workers will have no alternative. They will go back. But if the employers will not go back, the businessmen will not go back, it will be a huge problem. Who will employ all these people that didn't have a choice? They came back, but their bosses didn't. The factories, the business, who will create the life here as they used to be? Give you a small example. In the Galilee, there are 2,500 bed and breakfast. I don't know if you know that. It's beautiful, beautiful bed and breakfast, usually with beautiful view. This was a very important part of providence of the people here. Who would come to a bed and breakfast when Hezbollah is just on the other side of the border launching anti-tanks? The mayor, one of the mayor we've met, said something important. He said the state of Israel should take responsibility, should be responsible, and to minimize the capabilities of Hezbollah, to reduce the capabilities of Hezbollah, because what was actually created is kind of a security zone like we used to have in Lebanon for 18 years inside Israel, the Israeli side of the border. This is, of course, unheard of. There is no reason for that. Since Israel was established, it was struggling on its borders. We didn't know exactly. When I come to the elementary school in my town to give a lecture about Israel's borders, I always have a dilemma because we don't know exactly what's the borders of Israel. We look at the West Bank or Judah and Samaria. But with regards to the Negev and the Galilee, there was no doubt that these parts are the parts of the state of Israel. So Israel. If we lose these areas, Israel will shrink more. If we lose these areas, it will send the message that Israel is defeatable. And we cannot afford to lose these areas. And that's why it's so important to rebuild these areas. We were not in this kind of situation since 1948, not even in 1973. This was a different feeling. And in 73, the IDF succeeded in pushing the Syrians away from the Golan Heights within 3 days. We are 80 days in this war, and it's still not clear to us What's the solution to the threat of Hezbollah from the north? What's the schedule? I think the state of Israel should immediately build a plan to resettle the area around Gaza, the Gaza envelope, and should build the same plan to the north as well, and to find a way to bring the people back with security and with prosperity. Both of them are important. In 1917, when Tel Hai of Yosef Trumpeldor fell, there was no state of Israel and there was no IDF. The Jewish, it's not even citizens, the Jews in the land of Israel defended themselves. They had, in many cases, they had weapons or they had a small squad that defended them, part of their own community. I don't have a weapon. As a resident of the North, I expect a strong IDF to defend me. And this having said, and I am totally aware of the implication of this sentence, I have soldiers in my closest family. I totally understand the price, but not winning against this evil, the price will be higher. So we must do that. I think I can stop here and answer your questions. Excuse me for taking the time to read them. There is a question here about a poll among Israeli Arabs that recorded third of them support Hamas attack. I didn't see the poll. All I can say that what happened in May 2021, when we did have a lynch incident in various areas of the country, and there were riots, it proved us that there are different trends among the Arab citizens of Israel. And I experienced these different trends as a resident of the North when we have here actually a majority of the population which is not Jewish. And I can say that there are two contradicted trends. One trend is to integrate, and we see Arabs here now during this war that are completely dedicated to fight this fight, to protect, that were directly involved in rescuing Jews. We've seen this in various areas of the country, people that were just citizens, the Bedouins, for example, that rescued Jews from the music festival. We've seen volunteers in Magen David Adom, the parallel for the Red Cross. On the other end, you see the contradiction trend, which you see more Palestinian identity among others. So I think we should not ignore that there are actually two opposite trends here. And of course, the state of Israel should encourage the one that goes with the integration of the Arabs to the Israeli society. Well, I think that the IDF has sufficient munitions to sustain a campaign against both foes in the north and in the south, probably even if we talk about Syria or Iran, these kind of fronts. Well, I will put it this way. Since this war started, thousands of tons of munition landed in Israel from United States. It is clear that we need the support of the United States with regard to munitions, but on the other hand, the IDF is calculating the use of munitions to make sure to defend us if there will be war, I would say tomorrow, also up north. IDF expected and was making the training to prepare for a scenario of war in a few fronts. So it's not that we are not surprised. We knew that this could happen and we talked about it for a long time. Somebody is asking me to show us a map of my home and Alma, and you can understand for understandable reasons that I'm not going to do that. If you come here, I'll show you where we are. Does UNIFIL and the Lebanese army have any influence to keep order on the Israeli border? No, in short. In a longer answer, UNIFIL is a human shield. Hezbollah is using the UNIFIL position to launch the rockets from next to the position. Hezbollah is using a Lebanese army position to launch the rockets from next to these positions. And we've seen one Lebanese army soldier that was killed by the IDF fire, and IDF apologized because Hezbollah launched missiles from these areas. UNIFIL, the idea of the resolution that created UNIFIL the way it is was to create an area which is empty of any illegal weapon from the border to the Litani River, that's around 20 kilometers. It didn't happen. Hezbollah is everywhere, as I've said, almost in every home in South Lebanon, and UNIFIL was not entering to private territories, was not entering to Shiite towns. Whenever it tried to enter, doing something or enter in areas that Hezbollah is not interested, that UNIFIL will enter, it was beaten, it was blocked, it was one time even the vehicles were burned. It was actually attacked by Hezbollah. Kibbutz Misgavam is evacuated like many others. By the way, those of you who've been to Misgavam in the lookout is destroyed. Hezbollah launched an anti-tank missile to this lookout. Is there anything that the IDF can do about combating anti-tank missiles to destroy the capabilities? It takes time. It's a project day to day. IDF is doing that as we speak. There are everyday attacks of the IDF in Lebanon as well, but it's as I've said, house to house, not only the anti-tanks, but other capabilities of Hezbollah in the south. These are house to house. It's a house-to-house mission. That's why I don't believe in an international force that can do that. Okay, there is a question, has Hezbollah gone beyond symbolic support of Hamas? And if so, do you see stronger reaction from Israel? The reality that I've just described in the north is an example to the fact that this is not symbolic. Okay, symbolic is 2 rockets in an operation, or 3 or 2 rockets in 2 weeks. That's symbolic. Everyday anti-tank missiles that are actually hunting anybody who is at the border, this is not symbolic. This is something else. I think personally, and we talked about it also before the war, that Hezbollah was interested in war before Hamas massacred our brothers and sisters in the south. Hezbollah escalated the situation on a daily basis. On the northern border here, it was well prepared for an invasion. The plan that Hamas executed is the same plan that Hezbollah published a decade ago, of the offensive plan to occupy the Galilee. That's the name Hezbollah gave it. And I think that what is happening now is just Hezbollah trying to navigate between its interest to escalate the situation on the Israeli and Lebanese border, but at the same time, not to do it for Hamas, actually to do it for Lebanese interest. Hezbollah is not interested to die for Hamas. It is interested to build its image as the protector of Lebanon. That's why it is trying to put Israel in an unbearable situation that eventually will lead to violence. And we already see that it is described in international media as exchange of fire between Hamas and Hezbollah, even though it is clear that Hezbollah started that, and it is clear that we can no longer live under this threat. How do people in America can help us, support us in the most meaningful ways? Share. This webinar will be online soon. Share all the information that we publish. Share, speak to your friends, spread the word about what's going on here in the south, in the north. I think that the north part of Israel is the untold story. People don't know that what is actually going on here. So I think that the only way to push Hezbollah back to the Litani is by a ground incursion. I am extremely careful from telling the IDF what kind of military operation is needed. I think that from my comfortable chair here at the Alma Center, it is better for me I can talk about the need and the necessity for a military operation. I wouldn't want to talk about what kind of military operation. I can say that it's not about deterrence. It's about eliminating the capabilities. This is very, very important. And the capabilities are not only around Radwan brigades, which are the parallel for the Nukhba brigades in Hamas that planned an invasion to Israel. It's also about the strategic weapons of Hezbollah, which are the PGMs, precision-guided missiles, which are long-range missiles, and all of these are not necessarily in South Lebanon. So that's why there should be a plan of how to bring security in a way that will eliminate the most problematic threats to the state of Israel. I'm trying to read more questions. Hezbollah appears to be just a puppet of the Iranian regime, which also arms Hamas. Can one stop the threat from Hezbollah without directly confronting Iran? We can stop, but we cannot stop it forever. And this is, by the way, it is true for Hamas as well. It's not only Tehran, it's actually fighting the ideology. Okay, if we will not fight the ideology, we will not build, in Gaza is a very good example because Gaza is destroyed. It's kind of, we are starting from the beginning. It's an opportunity to create a new reality and a new future, not only for Israelis living next to Gaza, but also for the Gazians themselves. And yes, if we will not deal with Tehran, Tehran will continue to provide weapons to these places. So we are now in Israel working on a military solution, but all of us know that it's not a solution forever, neither in the north nor in the south. It's a solution that we will have what we always say, to mourn the lone again and again and again, and I hope I'm saying this correctly in English, because as long as the ideology is still alive and kicking, and as long as there is the money and the munition that is coming from Tehran, it will be difficult to say, okay, this is forever. Needs to be done about Iran. The first thing that needs to be done, by the way, it's not only with regard to Iran, it's also with regard to Hezbollah, is to create an international coalition, to create an international understanding what we are facing here. I want, somebody asked how can you help? If you can influence your media platform to stop framing this war as Israel-Hamas war, while I have war here 9 kilometers from home, this would be very helpful. This is not Israel-Hamas war. American forces were attacked 88 times in Syria and Iraq since this war started by proxy militias of Iran. Retaliation, only 7 times. The Houthis of Yemen are attacking ships in the Straits of the Arab Gulf, in the Red Sea. There was even one attack that came directly from Iran, not far from India. We should understand that this is something much, much different than an Israel-Hamas war. So bottom line, stability, security, these are all very temporary when the only one who is fighting is Israel against Hamas and Israel against Hezbollah. And we know that, Israelis know that. Do we believe that there has been significant tunneling threat that has crossed the border in any number of locations that leads to conducting combat within opposed? Okay, I don't know. And I want to talk about the tunneling. This is important. In 2018, Israel found 6 border crossing tunnels of Hezbollah. This was kind of a surprise for Israelis that assumed that Hezbollah would not invest in this kind of project because the terrain is very different from Gaza. There are tons of places to hide even without tunnels. It's not like Gaza that you can see for a distance. It's hills and valleys and trees, and in the winter it's even foggy. It's rocky soil to excavate this kind of tunnels. It's 40 centimeters every day. It took them a decade to excavate 1 kilometer. Yet Hezbollah had 40 years, 40. In the end of the 90s, Hezbollah military leadership was in North Korea to learn from them the underground warfare. And from there, the process of tunneling started, and we actually have different types of tunnel. The border crossing tunnels are one type, which I don't know whether there are more. IDF is saying that there are no more tunnels, and of course continues to search. But there could be other underground infrastructures that Hezbollah is using. First, I hope all of you saw the pictures that came out of Gaza of a strategic tunnel, which is very wide, that a vehicle can drive in this tunnel. Hezbollah has the same. We found the video of Imad Murnia, the ex-military commander of Hezbollah that was assassinated in 2008 inside a tunnel with a launcher in Lebanon. we understand that there are what we call strategic tunnels like that can connect various areas of operation of Hezbollah in Lebanon, from Beirut to the south, for example. There are tunnels that are tactical tunnels that enable the fighters to move from one home to another, tunnels that enable to hide the launchers, open the launcher, launch some rockets, and then it closed again. We've seen this in 2006. There could be what we call explosive tunnels that they are blocked. Nobody can walk in these tunnels that are explosive tunnels. There are only explosives in the tunnels, and there is a small wire. And if they explode, it collapses, and everything that above it collapses as well. There could be tunnels that are not crossing the border, but actually getting very close to the border, a few meters, few tens of meters from the border. And that way we can still be surprised, because they will operate most of the time underground and then pop out a few meters from the fence. I don't know. The bottom line is that I don't know, but Hezbollah probably prepared all these types of tunnel. Does Hezbollah now want a war, or that war to include the United States? I think that Hezbollah is interested in war, but it is not interested to be identified with a war that is on behalf of the Palestinian cause. And that's why it is already building the excuses for a war between Israel and Lebanon on behalf of Lebanese cause. The discussions that are being held as we speak, the negotiations about a diplomatic arrangement, Hezbollah is behind the scenes sending messages that this is conditioned with solving the land dispute, which actually doesn't involve any occupied Lebanese, but there is a town where you have 3,000 Israelis, Alawite Israelis, not Jews, that they say, we are Syrians, and Israel occupied our town in 1967 with the Golan Heights. Why the UN marked the border between Israel and Lebanon in the middle of our town? And Hezbollah is demanding that Israel will evacuate, and the UN, by the way, evacuate the northern part of the town, and everybody ignores the humanitarian issue of this town. So here is an excuse, and we'll see where it goes. Personally, I can say that if at the beginning of this war, I felt that I don't exactly understand the policy, and that Hezbollah may join in any minute, and I took my kids away, and I was really terrified of the option that there will be an invasion of the Radwan brigades and we are not prepared. I cannot say that I feel the same today, because I think that Hezbollah created here a situation that is very comfortable for it. We are, as I've said, we evacuated the residents, the Israeli side. There is kind of a war of attrition, and eventually we will get to the point that something will have to happen, because the state of Israel will not tolerate the continuance of this kind of situation. I don't think that Hezbollah itself is interested that the United States will be directly involved, but I do think that the Iranians are trying to, how do I say, to create limited attacks against the United States, because Israel is perceived as the long arm of the United States in the region. So anything that will weaken the presence of the United States in the region, this is what Hezbollah and the Iranians are looking for. Somebody is asking about the Burkan that I talked about, if they are louder. Yes. They are louder than regular rockets. They are different than regular rockets, and they create more damage. Yes. Okay, here is a very good question. In seeing what the IDF has inclined on Gaza, in this having some deterrent to Hezbollah, or they don't care what happens to the south of Lebanon anymore. They may be happy to keep peppering away, and not full on war. I must say that this question is under debate among researchers and analysts of Lebanon. Lebanon is truly kind of a secret or an onion that you need to peel of all the covers until you get to the heart of it. And I have an opinion which is, I think, very different from other famous researchers here in Israel. I think that Hezbollah is using the population. If you hide your missiles below the beds of your children, I'm not sure you care about their lives. So if you have 130 military operatives of Hezbollah that are dead, your motivation is to revenge, not to stop, okay? And that's why they are not stopping. They want to revenge. And if now they are starting to launch these anti-tanks from more and more from populated areas, and that way when IDF is targeting the sources of the shooting and civilians are getting killed, so there is more motivation of Hezbollah to revenge and not to stop. Hezbollah, it is important for Hezbollah to preserve the support of its base, but its base is also dependent on Hezbollah. They don't have too much of a choice. So it's kind of a relationship that Hezbollah wants to continue to provide its Shiite base in Lebanon what it needs. For example, the compensation for the damages in Lebanon, or treating the evacuees in Lebanon. But at the same time, I cannot say they truly care about human life because this is the culture of death. So it's a different way of looking at the question of how do I view damages in Lebanon? How do I deal with damages in Lebanon? And I think the war deterrence is truly becoming irrelevant after October 7th, because if you want to deter a terrorist organization, what you have to do is to make it believe that it is incapable, not that it is afraid, because it is not afraid to its life. It is raising its children to sacrifice their life for the cause of hate. So if you want to deter it, you need to make it understand that its capabilities will not cause the damage that they want to cause. Okay, is Jordan likely to join in? That's the last question, and I'm very proud that I succeeded in going through all the questions. Is Jordan likely to join in? Jordan by itself, if you look at its government, the answer is no. Jordan is, moreover, the government of Jordan is fighting, for example, the drug industry of Iran that goes all the way from Tehran through the Syrian-Lebanese border, and from there through Syria into Jordan. Jordan by itself, 2 weeks ago, the Jordanian security forces catch a shipment of munitions that were on their way to West Bank, to different kind of rockets, and they succeeded in catching that and preventing this smuggling of weapons. So I think that there is a level of security collaboration between Israel and Jordan in this regard, and Jordan is not interested in escalation in the West Bank or joining in. There is a different question of how stable is the government of Jordan and how stable is the government of Jordan, while the Iranians are also working in this direction to undermine this government. And it's, maybe it's a question for a different discussion with somebody who is an expert to Jordan that is following there every day. But of course, this question is becoming much more relevant during this current conflict. So I think I will stop here, and I would just make a closure and said that this webinar was, a little bit different than previous ones, because I wanted to share with you much more of impressions and the feelings, even feelings that I came with after my tour to the north and the south, one day after the other, and the feeling of why eventually our young, amazing generation is fighting, and all of us understand we are fighting for our lives. We are fighting for the homes that you see just behind me over there. We understand that we cannot lose the South and we cannot lose the North, and we are not going to enable these terrorist organizations to take us out of areas which are the state of Israel. Thank you for being with us, and I hope to see you in our next webinar. Spread the word. Continue to follow us at israel-alma.org. I'm Sarit Zehavi from the Western Gallery.